On behalf of the Louisiana Center for the Book and the State Library of Louisiana, thank you for joining us for our celebration of Black History Month. Our speaker today is poet Mona Lisa Saloy. Mona Lisa Saloy is an author, folklorist, and scholar of Creole culture. She is the Conrad N. Hilton Endowed Professor of English at Dillard University in New Orleans, and recently completed her second term as Louisiana Poet Laureate. Her first poetry collection, Red Beans and Ricely Yours, won the T.S. Eliot Prize and the Penn Oakland Josephine Miles Award. Her Second Line Home, celebrates New Orleans Black Creole culture. Black Creole Chronicles, her most recent book, continues that theme and is the 2024 selection for One Book, One New Orleans, a program that invites people to read the same book at the same time as a way to increase literacy and a sense of community. Saloy's presentation today will focus on the importance of the 7th Ward, a neighborhood with a rich but often overlooked history, despite its location near the French Quarter.
Hi, I'm Mona Lisa Saloy, and it is my pleasure and honor to be here with you today. I'll begin with some poems and then wind up with a PowerPoint about the 7th Ward, my home, in the heart of New Orleans. The first poem in my new book is a prayer. It is the dedication, actually, and it goes like this. The dedication itself says, "Thank you, Almighty God, for this life, for my family, for my people everywhere, united by culture, separated by seas." SEAS. End the poem. Thank you, Lord in heaven, you've taken us to here. Thank you for all your blessings, for all the trials that took us to now. We've ached too much, we've cried too much, we've lied too much, almost died too much, too often, even in these days and times. Lord, bless the souls of those taken too soon, too violently stolen. We've longed too much for all that is not good for us. We've laughed a lot, even at the hard knocks felt each age, Lord. We've inhaled too much, trying, dying, finally beginning to breathe. We've devoured our dreams and spit them on steps to nowhere. We've seen too much hurt, too much hunger, too much pain, not to know that we are not in charge, that by your grace we stand, having created culture and families and dreams of who we could and have become. We know. We thank you. We praise you. We honor you and pray those after us begin to understand just how good you are to us. Black Creoles say, by grace, we're like good coffee. Bad ain't got nothing on our grounds. And this poem is entitled Black Creole Chronicle. Black New Orleans for true. Come Mondays, some will never see us. Some will never understand. Only some will get us. Only some will dig our sound, our joy, our style, our hip, reverb, our lingo, our tales. Tall, squat, and old as the world. Will they see who or what she or he is or they are? Our crime was being Black. Our salvation, faith. An African ancestry, replete with exuberant arts, adaptable like lizards. We weren't supposed to survive whole. Black Creoles say, now you got the picture with the right pair of drawers on. Creoles burrow, guardians of the Creole groove. Creoles can't stay calm doing nothing. We make guitar or piano solos or wheel one potato, two potato at play, or make salad with eggs to kiss your papa. Don't much bother folks who wake up to sweet smells of cane syrup laced on galette pie. That's pan-fried shortening bread. Well, who makes the best oyster stew? Who shucks them best fast? We be doing us. But we don't mind waiting to see the Lord. In the meantime, we tell kids there's ancestors in your veins. We, called to the battlefield of life, turn stumbling blocks to skipping stones. Slip, slap, smile, or frown. Stories turn our necks around. hold someone's good in mind, and be safest in somebody's prayers. Now that's between you and me and the gatepost now. That's between you and me and the gatepost. You heard me? This is called Seventh Ward Daily Fare or Black Creole Talk. In the Crescent City, we live in the inside of good luck, the right side of blessings. Past front steps and porches, we're a giving thanks and praying town. Contrary to popular opinion, there's more churches than bars. Annually, we count the storms missing us, laugh and thank you, Lord, for another safe season. And in the middle of smiles, we see each other, wish y'all well, until we chew the fat on the gallery again. Hey, he looks like Uncle Brother. No, he looked like Jesse Hill. Who that? Mr. Oople Papa Do himself. Oh, they did that dude bad. Buried in Holt Cemetery. What? Potter's Field. No lie, that's kaput. Bad luck. Uh-oh, got a step. Need to find a stump to fit and rest my rump. Chew some pecans later. Amen. Oh, I want to tell you about ooh, poo, ba, doo. You know they call me the most. Mm, 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 mm. Ooh, poo, ba, doo. You know they call me the most. Oh yeah, and I won't stop trying till I create disturbance in your mind. That's Jesse Hill. This piece is called What We Know Now That Was Not Taught in School. Transatlantic slave trade began in the 1400s when Portugal and other European kingdoms expanded overseas to Africa, mother fatherland to all. Portuguese kidnapped peoples from the African west coast, took those enslaved Africans on a journey between Africa and the Americas called the Middle Passage. Could take 4 to 6 weeks. The average lasted 2 to 3 months. Such storms still reign on the Atlantic. The White Lion, an English privateer ship, operated a Dutch letter of marque, brought Africans to the English colony, Virginia, in 1619, a year before the Mayflower's arrival in New England, late August, when 20 to 30 enslaved Africans landed at Point Comfort, today's Fort Monroe in Hampton, Virginia. Aboard that English privateer ship, White Lion, these Africans, commodities, were traded in exchange for supplies. It's said some 1.8 million Africans perished in the Middle Passage. Now, the last U.S. slave ship, the Clotilda of Africans to America, 1860, landed at the bottom of the Mobile River in Alabama. They found it in 2019. American direct importation of enslaved Africans legally ended in 1808, only 1 year post the British. On the mighty Mississippi, New Orleans, the Crescent City, sold more enslaved Africans than any American city. Enslaved Africans built European wealth. There was no middle class prior to African enslavement in Europe. Enslaved Africans built the wealth of America. They and descendants of mixed enslaved Africans, the Portuguese called Creoles, blacks who gave America blues, Negro spirituals grown into gospel music, such sacred and secular musical styles blended into jazz, fused into soul music, or rhythm and blues, into rock and roll, into rock, into rap, into pop, still evolving. Out of a cruel and forced migration of stolen people, enslaved Africans were taken back to Europe or to the New World for labor and their skills. The Triangle Slave Trade, it's called. Estimates of 36,000 ships took over 5 million Africans to the New World again and again. Then Africans returned to Europe with the white gold, sugar, coffee, tobacco, plus rice. Long grain rice really is Uncle Ben's from Senegal, the Gambia. The shotgun house, West African architecture, where families lived during planting or harvest time, imported to the New World, a must in hot, humid southern air. The shotgun home hails throughout the New World, the Caribbean, South America, the American South, a mainstay. More gifts came. Soul food is now hot cuisine. Plantation homes stand still by labor of Africans from the Congo who knew which woods did not rot. Celebrated ironwork of Europe, New Orleans, the refining of iron smelting by Yoruba. Their handiwork remains art throughout the ages. From the ancient Akan kingdom, Ndinkra symbols adorn French Quarter balconies, gates, each symbol a proverb, a story, a legacy, such as Sankofa, a bird looks back to go forward. Now, my papa was born enslaved in Alabama, Sumter, now a county. Walked to New Orleans to be free. Heard that all my life. He lived to 110. Me, just a new tween. He, the oldest, me and two cousins, Larry, 6 months older, Dwight, 6 months younger, left in his care all our early days. Oh, our papa held court on the front porch of our shotgun double, and folks came from far just to listen. What a storyteller, a preacher who co founded Mount Zion Baptist Church on North Robertson Street, which drowned and did not return from post Katrina flooding, where his picture hung for decades. I thought Papa told good lies, a good jokester, preacher dude, but he lived so long, knew what many folks didn't. It was in college, studying African literature, when I learned our Papa's stories were West African tales, handed down by word of mouth, face to face, generation to generation, the definition of folklore. Papa knew generations of families, could tell relatives what happened to Buddy and his gang, or Hawkeye and his girls. He signed his name with an X over half a century before Brother Malcolm, which is how the Army knew he was too old to join World War I. Though well built, still strapping and strong for someone illiterate, he just knew too much. Official Army records show he had to be over 50, 55, not 30, so they said no. Already a brickmaker, bricklayer, cement finisher skills, he taught his sons, who became craftsmen, laying sidewalks, courtyards, churches from the Vieux Carré, Treme, 6th Ward through the 7th Ward. Corpus Christi, Epiphany School and Church, St. Raymond. Living through Jim Crow teaches daily lessons of humility and indignity. Overt cruelty unchecked, lynchings, folks disappeared, found later in pieces sometimes, or a dragging death murder of James Byrd Jr. in Jasper, Texas, murder of Trayvon Martin, Breonna Taylor forever, George Floyd, to the more microaggressions some light Black folks accused of passing for white, a joke, Black Jap, Blasian. Some call, oh, you're only half the N word. Our days and tales celebrate the joy we make together. There's snatches of life during Jim Crow, the devastation sustained cruelty causes. There's decreases in Black American numbers since 1790, from being over 19.3% to less than 12% now. Blacks are still jailed quickly for less than whites and remain jailed or die there. We are not half, but multi-human, beautifully Black, and a lot more fun fanning cultures to live well. Only justice is still just us, America. But we are more and more in blossoming. And I'm going to save one poem on the 7th Ward to wrap up. But for now, I want to share with you the screen you're looking at. This is my home, where I'm born and raised and still reside. You're seeing a picture of my parents that was scanned for me by my eldest brother, who would be 97 this year if he was still alive. And because I lost everything, like a lot of people, there's a picture of all my worldly goods, mostly books. There's a picture of St. Aug High School. I'll talk about that later. Corpus Christi on the. There's Kermit Ruffins. He still maintains a bar in the neighborhood. And on the far right bottom, far left, I guess it's your right, my left, is me next to my chocolate faced mother at a backyard party. And the Seventh Ward Speaks as a poster that was a project by the Porch and the Neighborhood Story Project. And I'm indebted to them for that. Here is the geography of the Seventh Ward. It's second in size only to the Ninth. Begins at the Mississippi, bordered between Elysian Fields Avenue and Esplanade, where it meets Bayou St. John. Geographically, it extends from Bayou St. John to Lake Pontchartrain and Corpus Tremaine. A little widely known fact. So there's this part is Tremaine here. So the London Avenue Canal runs through the ward from just in from Gentilly Ridge to the lake. Dillard University is in the Seventh Ward, as is most of the University of New Orleans campus near the lakefront. The New Orleans Fairgrounds, home to horse racing, and the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, is just back from Esplanade Avenue, as is St. Louis Cemetery No. 3. Frenchman Street, a popular destination for food and live music, is in the front of the ward near the French Quarter. Esplanade Ridge, as with most of New Orleans, the area along high ground, the riverfront, was developed first. This area is today the Marigny Triangle of the Faubourg Marigny, and Faubourg is a neighborhood. The New Orleans and Pontchartrain Railway, the first U.S. railway away from the Atlantic coast, ran for a century along Elysian Fields between the riverfront and the famous camps at Milneburg. The area is known for Creole citizens who once heavily populated the area. Esplanade Ridge between Rampart and Bayou St. John was one of the first parts of town substantially developed away from the riverfront. Some of the elegant early 19th century Creole style mansions, as you can see here, can be seen along Esplanade Avenue. That was the colored uptown. The areas between Gentilly Ridge and the lakefront was developed in the 20th century with improved drainage, and you can see drainage in New Orleans. One of the hallmarks of our neighborhood, the Seventh Ward, and in France, instead of saying ward, they say arrondissement. So our wards are designed the same way most French cities are. And in this ward is St. Augustine High School, which was built by the Archdiocese of New Orleans, funded by the Catholics of that archdiocese through the Youth Progress Program and Black Catholics. The building site was bought by the Society of St. Joseph of the Sacred Heart, the Josephite brothers, fathers and brothers, and they operate the school and were entrusted to it and still do. So the Archdiocese placed the school under the patronage of St. Augustine of Hippo, a preeminent Christian and scholar of Africa and a father of the church. From its inception, the school was intended for the education of young men from Black Catholic families of New Orleans. In 1951, when education was segregated, schools in New Orleans open to Black students were seen as generally poor. Not St. Aug. They had high standards and a beautiful building. It is home to the world-renowned all-Black high school of the Marching 100. You've probably seen them on many national parades. It's an institution, and we can hear them practice in the afternoons. Coming home to that is just a sweet treat. And they led the way in battling segregation for many, many reasons. From the source of the Houdat controversy, which I had the honor of being part of discovering, to the desegregation of high school athletics, so that by the end of the 1960s, St. Aug teams would play against teams from white schools. But this famed Marching 100 was the first Black high school band to march in the Rex Parade on Mardi Gras Day. And the Marching 100 also played for the Pope, Super Bowls, and presidential inaugurations. What an honor. Some astute St. Aug alums: Sidney Bartholomew, mayor of New Orleans; Nat Dorsey played for the Cleveland Browns; Victor Goines, musician; Wynton Marsalis, quartet, former artistic director of Juilliard's Jazz Studies program; Cortez Hankton, NFL player for the Minnesota Vikings; Tyrone Hughes, Former New Orleans Saints kick returner Louis Age, former NFL offensive tackle, Chicago Bears. Leroy Horde, former NFL running back for the Cleveland Browns and Minnesota Vikings. Avery Johnson, former NBA player and NBA coach, Donald Royal. Former NBA player, Orlando Magic. Kerry Kittles, former NBA star. Harold Sylvester, actor. Carl Weathers, actor. Stan Barrett, sportscaster, ESPN. Mac Main, rapper. Young Money. DJ Black, mild DJ, producer, radio personality. Dwight Fitch, his son, Dwight Fitch Jr. His other sons, John Anthony, played with Imagine, got a gold record for The Wood. Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis, running back for the New England Patriots. Louis Oubre, former NFL player for the New England Patriots. Derek Rogers, NFL player for Miami Dolphins. Lonnie Martz, NFL player for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. James Hall, player for the St. Louis Rams. Paul Irons, AAFL player for the team, Michigan. Sam Holden, NFL player for the New Orleans Saints. And there are many more. It is also the home of Dillard University, founded in 1869. It's a liberal arts four-year program, historically Black, or HBCU, affiliations with the United Church of Christ and the United Methodist Church, a founding member institution of the United Negro College Fund, more affectionately called UNCF. Ranked 17th in 2007 in U.S. News and World Report, top-tier Southern Comprehensive College, but it has been voted in recent years the fifth most beautiful campus in the country. And Dillard University graduates more Black physicists than any university in the country. So these are some hallmarks. Notable Seventh Ward residents: Jelly Roll Morton, considered the founder of jazz. Dr. Joseph Hardin, who was an ambassador to the Mother Fatherland, Africa, as well as the Caribbean. Joe Jones, jazz drummer. John Scott, visual artist, spent his last years there. A.P. Turo, attorney who fought for civil rights. Tyler Perry, author, filmmaker, director, screenwriter. Ernest Morial, mayor, and his family. Sidney Barthélemy, mayor. C. Ray Nagin, former mayor. Lizzie Miles, singer. Alan Toussaint, composer, musician. He was originally from the Irish Channel, but spent the latter part of his life right around the corner from Jazz Fest. Manny Fresh, rapper. Wanda Ruzon, singer and grand marshal of Second Lines. Dwight and Connie Fitch, the Crescent City Sound Company. Chocolate Milk with Amity Castanel. Valina C. Jones, educator, and the namesake of Valina C. Jones School, which didn't return after the storm, but the neighborhood's still working on that. Marcus Christian, publisher, folklorist, and his crew of writers out of Dillard University who did the research on Black Creole culture for the WPA Guide to New Orleans. And of course, Albert Wicker, educator, namesake of Albert Wicker High School. This is a traditional Creole cottage, circa 1815, owned by Rosette Rochon. It's at 1515 Palger Street. This is a West Indian style. Women were the early owners of property in the Marigny, the ramparts. We're talking about Black women. As a matter of fact, in the ramparts, Black women owned more property than white women at the turn of the 20th century at the ramparts. So the owner of this cottage on Palger Street was Rosette Rochon, a woman of French and Haitian ancestry, born in Mobile, Alabama, 1767. An enterprising free woman of color who, before she died in 1863, made a fortune in New Orleans by speculating in real estate, renting property, and operating a grocery store. Gens de couleur libre, free persons of color. From the earliest days, these free peoples of color played an important role in New Orleans. As early as 1724, their legal status was defined. As their numbers increased, so did the regulations controlling their freedoms and behaviors. So gens de couleur libre, free people of color, were in New Orleans long before the great influx of Haitians. The Spanish, also their numbers increased, so did the regulations controlling their freedoms and behavior. The Spanish, as did the French before them, guaranteed freedom for children of free women of color, but there were numerous other restrictions. By the time of American rule in 1803, they were still guaranteed legal equality, though they were frequent victims of harassment and discrimination. They were not given the right to vote before the Civil War. In spite of difficulties, many free people of color came to New Orleans from Europe, and others came from French and Spanish colonies in the West Indies. They don't call us Caribbean North for nothing. More than 4,000 came between 1806 and 1810 from Santo Domingue just before the Civil War, and the census of 1860 shows the population of New Orleans was approximately 175,000. Among those were 10,689 free people of color, and they created a beautiful culture that everyone was attracted to. So the people who came called themselves Creole, meaning they were of European ancestry or born in the French and Spanish colonies. Many of them were educated or skilled craftsmen and spoke French. Again, these are mixed African and European ancestry people. So much of the Marigny is the Seventh Ward. It's a popular place to buy and build. The lots 60 feet by 120 are typical. They're small, relatively inexpensive. Well, they used to be. A homeowner could purchase one for about $300 to $400. The free men of color sometimes owned entire city blocks, and it was estimated they owned $15 million of real estate at one time. In the first 20 years of the 19th century, small Creole cottages were built and then replaced by larger ones in the 1830s as properties were bought and sold many times. In fact, by 1860, about 3/4 of the sites in the Marigny had been owned, at least at one time, by gens de couleur libre, or free people of color. And this is a typical shotgun layout. You can shoot a gun in the front and it would come straight out. And these are parallel rooms. This is a double layout, kind of like I was born in. Now, the Seventh Ward is considered quintessential Creole neighborhood, home to the accomplished people of color prior to the Civil War. Among the first owners was Claude Dubreuil, whose vast estate stretched from the river to Bayou Sauvage and Gentilly. By the late 1700s, this land changed proprietorship several times and finally came into the holdings of Bernard Marigny, who successfully subdivided the Faubourg Marigny and continued with what was called Nouveau Marigny between Elysian Fields, St. Bernard, and from St. Claude to Gentilly Road. When in 1830, the Pontchartrain Railroad connected the Faubourg Marigny with the settlement of Milneburg on the lake, and these lots became more sellable. The railroad helped Nouveau Marigny to grow almost to Gentilly Ridge. Now, that area of the Seventh Ward neighborhood that did not belong to Bernard Marigny belonged to Charles de Morand, who also owned most of what is now the Treme neighborhood. As the Vieux Carré became increasingly overcrowded, people were forced to seek residence in other developing areas of the city, and Nouveau Marigny was one of them. The area was settled by the second half of the 19th century. A significant number of German immigrants, French Creole families inhabited the neighborhood by the mid-1800s. However, it was free people of color, or gens de couleur libre, who came to characterize the Seventh Ward neighborhood. And again, they began to settle about 1720. By 1810, they were about 1/3 of the city's population. These people were well educated, highly skilled in building trades, spoke perfect French, and called themselves Creole. By the mid-1800s, many gens de couleur libre, or free people of color, took up residence in the Seventh Ward. Creole Seventh Ward families are known for strength in business enterprises, building trades, and music. Successful family-owned businesses such as insurance companies, laundries, barbershops, and especially funeral homes. This was straight up before even Jim Crow. We had to bury ourselves. Characterize the neighborhood from the mid-19th century to the early 20th century. Among similar lines, John Blassingame, incredible historian, notes in Black New Orleans 1860-1880 that the cultural and social life of the free Negroes was relatively rich. Dancing, gambling, drinking, singing were their major forms of recreation, though they also attended the theater, opera, the races, cockfights, and circuses. They organized more than 30 social and benevolent societies during the antebellum period and one orphan asylum. The best known organizations were La Société Catholique pour l'Instruction, des orphelins de excuse my French, dans indigence, the Colored Female Benevolent Society of Louisiana, the Union Bank Society, and the Benevolent Association of Veterans of 1815. Tommy LaFawn, you can find out about him in this book on Africans in New Orleans. And he was a businessman, philanthropist who contributed both to the arts and charitable causes, defining the poor, benefiting the poor of New Orleans. During his lifetime, he amassed a fortune of nearly $500,000, funds which at his death went toward the founding of the Home for the Aged Colored Men and Women at the LaFawn Orphan Boys Asylum. LaFawn also lent his funds and influence to the establishment of l'Institution Catholique des Orphelins et des Gens, the school for poor African American children that grew from Marie Couvin's legacy. LaFawn also bequeathed large sums to Charity Hospital, to the Society of the Holy Family, and to the Shakespeare Alms House. The great Henriette DeLille, daughter of one of the oldest families of free people of color in New Orleans, founded the Sisters of the Holy Family, the second oldest Catholic order for women of color, and particularly Black women. At an early age, she rejected what would likely have been a privileged life and chose to dedicate herself to the care of free Black enslaved communities. In 1836, along with several other women, she established the Sisters of the Presentation, which later became the Sisters of the Holy Family. The sisters worked among the poor, the sick, the elderly, and also among slaves. The order founded a school for girls in 1850, St. Mary's Academy, and in 1860 opened a hospital for needy Black Orleanians. Today, the Sisters of the Holy Family continue to contribute to the education of Black American youth and to the care of the sick and elderly through their work in New Orleans and elsewhere. And she is up for sainthood. She is currently venerated. Other important gens de couleur libre, free people of color, Sister Dorothy Olga McCants, and in the introduction to her 1973 translation of Rudolph Lucien des Dunes, Nos hommes et notre histoire, declares that these Creoles of color with Latin blood and certain other free Blacks made up a group collectively known as gens de couleur libre. This caste seems to have existed from the first introduction of the enslaved, and the gens de couleur were part of the population from the beginning of Louisiana history. They're specifically named in the Black Code issued by Bienville in 1724. And you should know that by this time there were 300 years already of Black codes from France. And most of those were in concert with the Catholic Church. The Haitian descendants were excelled. They excelled as musicians, artists, teachers, writers, doctors, and in all major professions. Some amassed considerable fortunes and educated their children in France or in unsegregated schools, and many of them went back and forth to Europe from Louisiana. They were an integral part of the Southern Louisiana life and maintained their own social status with a rigidity as strong as that found among whites. Another great book, The Free People of Color of New Orleans by Mary Gayam. By the mid-1830s, free Blacks owned $2.5 million in property in New Orleans. They had their own schools, usually operated as small private institutions in educators' homes. The earliest recorded school was in 1813, operated by G. Durfeuille, a free man of color. Some of the young men and women were sent to France or schools in northern United States to be educated. At the French Opera and Theater, they had their box seats in the second tier. On Sundays, they attended Mass at the St. Louis Cathedral. I'm sure they sat in the back. And throughout the week, they kept a busy social schedule of balls, parties, and meetings of benevolent groups. They acted in the First Theater, founded in 1793 by Madame de Rossier of Saint-Domingue, attended traveling circuses, and took an avid interest in the dramatic and musical arts of the city. Creole neighborhoods are faubourgs, and this is from New Orleans architecture. The Creole faubourgs, Sally Kittredge Evans describes the success of les gens de couleur libre as follows. The free people, persons of color, prospered in New Orleans, increased by numbers and wealth, and in general enjoyed a healthy relationship with white citizens, many. By 1830, their numbers had increased from 99, as recorded in this 1769 census, to almost 12,000 in the city, with some setbacks, particularly the efforts on the part of certain whites, to curtail the entry of additional free colored persons to Louisiana from any outside area. Their situation continued strong until eroded by the increasing fears and polarizations of the pre-Civil War decades, and you can see many of their tombs. Rudolph Lucien de Dune was a civic leader and scholar. He spent much of his professional life as a clerk with the U.S. Customs Service, but his contribution to history lies in his efforts to promote the achievements of his race and to challenge the legality of Jim Crow laws. He helped to organize the Comité des Citoyens, which backed Homer Plessy's unsuccessful attempt to challenge segregation in public transportation. And his book, Nos Hommes et Notre Histoire, Our People, Our History, published in 1911, celebrates the work of Louisiana people of color in art, literature, music, invention, philanthropy, and other fields of endeavor. And I'm honored to say that I belong to the Black American History. It's the American History Association. There's a Black American branch, and we just, thanks to Dr. Baham, chose the name of Rudolph Lucien de Dune as our section. So we're proud to honor his name in that way. Another great man, Louis Charles Roudanet, was a physician, civic leader, the owner of Creole newspapers, Les Unions, La Tribune de la Nouvelle-Orléans. Born in St. James Parish, the son of French merchant and a free woman of color, Dr. Roudanet was educated in France like many young gens de couleur libre. He received his medical degree from the University of Paris in 1853 and a second medical degree in 1857 from Dartmouth. He returned to New Orleans and began a successful practice open to blacks and whites during the federal occupation of the city. Roudanet and his brother, Jean-Baptiste, founded Les Unions, the newspaper, which, like its successor, La Tribune, advocated civil rights for black citizens. Edmond Dede. Dede was a violinist and composer, son of free black West Indian parents. Dede first studied the violin in New Orleans, then in Mexico, and in 1850 left for Paris, where he completed his musical education and began a career that lasted for nearly 50 years. As a violinist, musical director, and composer, Dede developed a considerable reputation abroad, but returned home to New Orleans only briefly in the winter of 1893 to 94 for a series of successful concerts, and his music is available. Tombs of free blacks. Many tombs of free black families, individuals, are in St. Louis Cemetery, number 1, mostly number 2, and some in number 3, especially number 2, in the square bounded by North Claiborne, Iberville, North Robertson, and Bienville. And here's a photograph taken from the Bienville Street entrance to the cemetery, and some of my people are there. Creole craftsman. This cottage displayed here once stood in the 700 block of Franklin Avenue. It was designed circa 1840s by Louis Nelson Fouché, a free man of color from Jamaica. According to Sally Kettridge Evans, Fouché, or Fouche, was a trained mason, architect, and mathematician. He also designed and built a substantial brick structure, this one, at the corner of Chartres and Mandeville Streets, or Charters and Mandeville. The Fouche manuscript. De Dune notes that Fouche busied himself mostly with painting, surveying, and the arts. So his 1882 work displayed here is a collection of quotations and maxims from various writers and philosophers. On sait opinions, sentences et maximes. How delightful is that? And of course, Les Sénèyes. By 1845, a group of 17 free men of color published Les Sénèyes, a collection of 85 poems, the first anthology of poetry by people of color ever published. Edited by a prominent female of color, Armand Nanous, the small volume, rare today, includes verses by poets such as Camille Thierry, Victor Séjour, Pierre Delcourt, Myrtille Fernand Liato, Johnny Cesti, and you can read it in translation from archives. In 1830, the Louisiana legislature passed an act to prevent free persons of color from entering this state. Section 12 of this act required all free Negroes, Griffs, and mulattoes of the first degree who had entered the state after the adoption of the Constitution of 1812 before January 1st, 1825, to enroll themselves with the office of the parish judge of their resident parish with the office of the mayor of the city of New Orleans. The act displayed here was passed in the following year to make it clear that long-established free Black population was not included within the scope of the new restrictions. And here, of course, the most famous voodoo queen in the city, whose teachings and activism still inspires people. And this is her signature. This is detail from the bond issued her for a license to sell what we now know as packaged liquor from an establishment of the corner of l'Histoire, now Calarac Street, and another undecipherable street, I can't tell. But from other sources, we know that her father, Charles Laveau, owned a number of properties on Calarac between Dauphine and Burgundy. Since he is recorded as on the bond as the security for her bond, it is likely that she was operating out of one of the family's buildings on that block. Charles himself is listed in another bond book as proprietor of a tavern across from the vegetable market, presumable on Decatur Street. So it's no wonder that she did hair and knew a lot of well-to-do women. Quadroon balls. By 1832, New Orleans City Directory published this image of the Orleans Theater along with a 2-page description of the building. Attached to the theater proper was the Orleans Ballroom, which, according to legend, if not fact, was the scene of the Crescent City's famed quadroon balls. In later years, the building on Orleans Street between Royal and Bourbon served as the convent of the Sisters of the Holy Family, the religious order founded in New Orleans by Henriette de Lille in 1842. It is now part of the Bourbon Orleans Hotel. So see also the Bayou Road site. There is a place right behind Bayou Road that was a site of the quadroon balls. The great craftsman tradition continued, and we're talking indenture agreements, apprenticeships. Half the indentures signed during this period were free people of colors from Haiti or Saint-Domingue. And again, artisans, carpenters, furniture makers, tailors, brick masons, coppers, shoemakers, blacksmiths, printers, cigar makers, and shipwrights. And although the majority were male, a significant number of young girls were indentured. And one in particular, Lolo Raymond, a free mulatto of color, 14 or 15, born at Mirabelet, Saint-Domingue, is bound to Mrs. Augustin that she might learn the trade of making fashionable articles. In addition to teaching this trade, Miss Augustin agrees to supply Lolo with sufficient food, lodging, clothing, washing, and the aid of the craft in the case of illness. So it was not uncommon in indenture agreements for the master also to agree to provide schooling for the apprentice. Antoine Julien Meffre Rouzan. Meffre Rouzan became a successful merchant and painter. He married Marie Alix Olivier de Vezin in 1840, and they maintained a home on Esplanade Avenue in New Orleans, where they collected paintings and sculpture. The Louisiana State Museum has a portrait of Madame Antoine Julienne Meffre Rouzan by Jean-Joseph Vauchon. And this portrait is by Eugène François Marie Joffes de Verrier. How about that? And his descendant, this is the famous Wanda Rouzan, who, and I'll get to her later, this is her great-grandmother, if I'm not mistaken, and this is their family tomb in St. Louis Seminary number 2. Wonderful singer. She had a hit record with her sisters in the 1950s, early rhythm and blues, around the time that Ray Charles was recording here. And here she is. We call her the sweetheart of New Orleans, our 7th Ward darling, a Jazz Fest regular, star of clubs, theater, and parades. Look, this is her Laura, Wanda, and Barbara, her sisters, their father, Harold. This is them when they had the hit song in the 50s. This was the poster that she adorned in 1999, the Jazz and Heritage Festival. And this is her on the street, leading a second line. So their big hit was called Men of War. And she was the backup for Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye by Danny White. And most recently in the neighborhood, this was a reshowing of The Testimony of a Big Chief. It's a film, a screening made by several people from the neighborhood and educators. And this was shown at Tulane, and it was called Testimony of a Big Chief, honoring Tootie Montana and Daryl Montana, both of whom born and raised in the neighborhood, masked as Black masking Indians for over 50 years. And this is Daryl in the center. This is him slapping that tambourine and leading the family and people in the neighborhood. That's another Montana and people of the Yellow Pocahontas. They're masking Black Indian tribe. This is Keith and Chandra McCormick, who did a lot of the photography for this film. This is the brother's name. Forgive me, I can't think of him, but he's a professor at Tulane. He was a young man when he made this film. And the great Willie Birch, an artist who co-founded The Porch. I'll talk about that later. This is the Chief of Chief, Tootie Montana of the Yellow Pocahontas. And this is him. And look at Fred Johnson, who led and still leads the Black Men of Labor. This is Tootie here with, I think that looks like Willie Birch, but this is the brother who not only one of the Freedom Riders, Jerome Smith, and they are supporting here Sweet Lorraine's. But it was the Black Men of Labor who brought water and supplies to people stuck in the Superdome after the flooding of Katrina, before anybody, before the state, before the cops, before anyone. So the Black Men of Labor, they mean it. And what I love now is the queens are honored. There's always been women in the Black masking Indians. The men were always out front, yes, but there are queens. And this is the current queen of the Yellow Pocahontas, Gumbo Marie, or Diane Honore. And this is her. We honored Daryl Montana for his 50 years of masking at the Louisiana State Museum at the Presbyterian. And that was Louisiana Folklife Month in October. And this is her in all her finery. And this is us at the screening. And The Porch was a great Seventh Ward institution. It didn't last, but it was co-founded by artist Willie Birch. And they taught Ed Buckner, who was then director, still teaches kids how to bead and how to make feathers. And there are social aid and pleasure clubs, and then some in the city, in the Seventh Ward. So culture from the streets up. So they're sometimes called mutual aid and benevolence societies in New Orleans. The social aid and pleasure clubs began as early as 1780, dedicated to the health care and general improvement of members' lives. 19th century records show approximately 200 of these organizations with society tombs in 2 burial grounds, Giraud Cemetery and St. Louis Cemetery No. 1. There's also almost that many of at least 200 of society tombs in Algiers of the social and pleasure clubs there. In the Seventh Ward, some remain more social, but remain with that benevolent nature for members. And Black people here, because there were more Africans sold from here, we kept that Africanness, not in the drum beats, not just in the drum beats, not just in the beating, but those secret societies exist in West Africa. And we brought that notion here, benevolent societies to help one another, get educated, to bury one another. So it's no wonder that in the Seventh Ward alone, various clubs included Les Jeunes Amis, the Young Men of Labor, the original Young Men of Illinois, the Plantation Revelers, the Jugs, the Beau Brummel Club, the Black Pirates, Le Bon Temps, the Brunch Club, the Epicureans, the Young Men of Illinois, the Vikings, the Young Men's 22s, and that is not an exhaustive list. What's not here is the names of the social and pleasure clubs founded and run by women, and women now actually parade. And so I love that. So second line's a way of life. And this is part of our sacred tradition that when you bury someone, there's a somber lament. And then once the person is put in the ground, then we celebrate the life lived. And that's where the second line comes from. So it's part of our sacred tradition. And that too is still celebrated in West Africa. So from Jelly Roll Martin to Louis Armstrong to Wynton Marsalis, these clubs supported the musical development of New Orleans by paying musicians to parade for them for many occasions. Holidays, funerals, weddings, birth, honors, benevolent societies help to nurture the development of music in New Orleans, also called second line clubs. They dance in the streets to live music, all dressed up to fly. And this tradition of dressing in the same way, again, West African tradition, still practiced. This is Louis Armstrong, he says, in Satchmo, My Life in New Orleans. I spent my life in New Orleans, but every time one of those clubs paraded, I would second line them all day long. What a training ground for musicians. And I'm wrapping up here. This is my new book, Black Creole Chronicles, Poems. It is an evolution of what I've been studying. This is my mother when she was still living, in me. And my nephew who taught me how to save, Louis. This is Tootie. This is Melanie, who's now a dentist. This is my sister, Barbara Ann. This is the Cerie house, no longer there. My brother, Anthony. This is Dwight. He's like my little brother and my cousin. And there's Larry, my cousin. So we're 6 months apart. I just love this. And these are my grandparents. This is my papa, born enslaved, Frank, and his wife. And you can see that she is half his age at least. This is my first book, Red Beans and Rice, Yours. And the cover art is by Louisiana Jones. He's no longer with us, but boy, he just captured the spirit of the day. So, Seventh Ward families, we make and keep the culture. Et là-bas. And my sources, I'll just leave that up for a second. And I'm going to end with a poem called The Seventh Ward. I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to end with the poem called The Seventh Ward. The Seventh Ward kisses the Mississippi where Esplanade begins and sachets her bottom at Lake Pontchartrain. Seventh Ward is home to hucklebucks or snowballs on a hot summer day. Seventh Ward is home to backyard parties of shucking oysters or sucking mud bugs. Seventh Ward is jazz, blues, rhythm and blues groups like Chocolate Milk or the Crescent City Sound Company. Seventh Ward is home to Roseanne's shotgun builders and Wanda, who leads the second line bands, and Grace's stages of Jazz Fest. Seventh Ward is home to Jelly Roll Martin and City Bass Shay, the original jazzmen. Seventh Ward is home to jazz drummer, Joe, you talk too much, you worry me to death, Jones. They say if you hear a Seventh Ward drummer, he plays New Orleans. Seventh Ward is home to the Baquet family Creole world-class Lil Dizzy restaurant. Seventh Ward is home to more churches and bars, from Beecher Memorial to Corpus Christi, St. Raymond's Gospel Choir, the Rock of Ages Baptist Church, United Fellowship's Full Gospel Plus. Seventh Ward is home to Cook's barbecue aromas that come with a taste across the fence, even today. Seventh Ward is home to neighborhood artisans from the Yellow Pocahontas group fanning beads and feathers of glory for over a century, parading just for us, for free. Or the Hardhead Hunters in their annual Chawa Indian Parade, Black Warrior Parade, chanting, dancing, greeting neighborhood masking men and us at Bullitt Sports Bar or Hardin Park. Seventh Ward is home to historic Autocrat Club, whose Friday fish plates, Wednesday fundraisers help a lot of folks. Seventh Ward is home to sausage-making Creole Bashman and Vaucresson families. Theirs tastes like more. Seventh Ward is home to Seventh Ward social and pleasure clubs, the Black Men of Labor, Our Heroes, who brought water to folks who fled flooding streets, then stuck safe in post-Katrina Superdome before the National Guard came. Seventh Ward is home to the Circle Food Store since 1938 across from Hunter's Field, once ablaze with a Richard C. Thomas mural painted with 30 neighborhood kids and Little League baseball games. Seventh Ward is home to Spirit House, sculpture by John Scott on St. Bernard and Gentilly. Seventh Ward is home to Valina C. Jones and St. Augustine High of Marching 100, who play for the Tournament of Roses parade and a highlight of all Mardi Gras parades. Seventh Ward is home to generations of families from the Two Rows to the Heidells, the Morials, from the musical Fitch clan to Alan Toussaint, who spent his last decades near the fairgrounds. Seventh Ward is home to kids blasting a trumpet on the walk home from school. Seventh Ward folks greet you in the morning, evenings, wave from a gallery or porch with a warm, hey now, That's your mom in them. Seventh Ward is home. Thank you for listening.